Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, and London, England, as well as Paris, France, and of course, you good old boys from in Canada, you know we love. You in Africa, the Big C tribe. But see, I tell you, there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful July the 6th, 2018. Big C, how's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, we're waiting on NASCAR to get started down here. All those sports that you guys love and everything. I mean, it's become a boring time of the year for you. But we have the guys who love to make the left turns. We got the Daytona 400 Coca-Cola coming up, Charlton.
Yeah,
they'll be sniffing gasoline and rubber for hours out there.
Yeah, I know, and hopefully that's just from the cars, not from the good old boys with their libations in the stands. A lot going on in the whole world. Think about it, all around the world, Big C Sports being followed. Got Russia World Cup going on, and there's a lot of good action and happening in soccer. It'd just be nice if they had it in a country that didn't dope everybody. Big C. Also, as you mentioned, the drag car, guys racing their cars down south. Everybody's loving basketball, even though basketball just in it still have summer league taking place. But I know baseball is in the swing of things, and golf is always good when you have certain players there. But I walked into a store just the other day, and in the magazine section, I saw college football magazines, Big C. I saw the NFL magazines. Now, here we are still in the month of July. But for me, it was exciting to see these college football magazines on the newsstands. And I wonder, you guys probably have them year-round, but out here in California, we have seasonal football, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you think about it, NFL training camp starts next week.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's how close football season is. And it's getting to a point where you don't really have a low.
No, you don't.
Because the draft is normally, 5 weeks after the Super Bowl, Charlton?
Yes.
So they keep you intense when it comes to that. Then right off the bat, they start having these OTAs. So, the rookies have to report that week after the draft.
Yes.
Then you have a couple of OTAs that go on that, the media loves because veteran players won't show up. They're like, well, he's holding out. He's not going. And he's sitting there, look, I'm down here in the Cayman Islands. Why the hell would I want to go to practice?
Practice.
What is that? Allen Iverson, practice. We're talking about practice.
Yep, that's fun. That's always good.
When you talk about the college game, Charlton, and, we spoke yesterday that by the year 2020, there'll be 778 college football teams, Charlton.
Wow.
That's a lot. And so, it's synonymous with the Supreme Court unleashing betting nationwide, Charlton.
Yeah.
And so all of these things involve, all of it is going, and no one's talking about paying the players, Charlton.
Nope.
And, you talk about the magazines being out on the newsstands already this week.
$14 for a magazine that doesn't talk. It's all still pictures. I remember back in the day when I was playing college ball, they were about $4, $3.99. And the content was good. Now the content's not as good because we can see it on our phone. I do want to say this segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. So when you can see on your phone, just like Big C Sports, the platforms that we're on, you can just pull it up on your phone and go to Big C Sports Podcast, and it pops up there anywhere in the world, Big C. So when I'm looking at how, and I love college football, there's something, it maybe it's an oxymoron to say this, but it's something pure about college athletics, at least from the athlete's point of view.
What the hell you watching the game?
Well, I hear California, Big C.
Okay.
I know I don't see it Southern style, the way you guys have a lot more at stake. But I want to, and I know you love this time of year. I know you love all the sports, but I think this would be the one that you would say that's the season that I really enjoy. What is it about football that makes the whole country fall in love with it, even though most people can't play the game at the high school, college, and especially professional level? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I believe it's the intensity of the game, the rawness of football. It's today's modern gladiator sport when you look at it.
Yeah.
You know, everything hinges on a few players and a few plays. You know, you make a mistake in football, you may not recover from it.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at basketball, you know, the three-point shot can get you back in the game at any point.
Yes.
You know, baseball, the home run will, you know, keep the game close.
Yeah.
But in football, someone gets up 1 or 2 touchdowns on you, Johnson, it becomes a more difficult feat. And when you think about the violence of the game,
yes,
I don't care what we are in society, we can talk about whatever movement is going on out there, who you protect, and, you know, how do you keep people safe. And even football is trying to talk about how do you keep people safe. The essence of the game is violence, Charlton.
Yes, it is.
That's the purity of wildlife, Charlton. Violence. When you talk about lions surviving,
yeah,
it's all about violence with them, Charlton. It's violence to keep your harem together. It's violence to eat. So
hold on, Big
it's
Z.
all about violence.
I want to know, what about a lion's harem? Do you talk to lions? There's a good old boy that did a movie. He talked to animals. Was it Jim Carrey back in the day? He was talking to animals. Are you talking to lions, and are they discussing their challenges of keeping the harem together, Big Z?
Well, Charlton, you know, I'm going to respect him at what he does. You know, that's one line that I'm not going to cross in the sand. You know, I'm going to let him have his way. But when we look at sports, and you look at football,
yes,
football is about dominance, Charlton.
Yeah.
Who can dominate who? You know, one of the terminologies has always been used in football, enforcing their will.
Yeah.
You know, when you're dominating a team, especially, you know, years back when you had teams that ran the football.
Yep.
And that was the biggest part of the game before the great passing era that has come along. It was about teams enforcing their wills. I mean, offensive linemen get excited when you run the ball.
Yes.
You know, they accept the pass, but when they're running the ball, it's like them going out on a date and going to a buffet. It's like all you can eat. And that's what they look at. It's like, let's go. You know, I'm going forward instead of going backwards. I may not be the most mobile guy.
Yes.
But, you know, you sit there, and when you have a dominant offensive lineman and they look at you,
yes,
they come up to the line, you know it's a running play. So they're smiling. You know, say, hey, I don't want you to take this butt whipping person, but I pass it out on a regular basis.
That reminds me of the movie North Dallas 40, and has obviously, I think Nick Nolte was the one that played that character, and it showed more of the realisms of what happens in the game of football. But I also go back to Brian's song when it was Gale Serious and Brian Piccolo, and they were that story when I was a little boy. That's the part that I miss about football now, because we make it more about, let's get the stadium loud. We have amped up music, you know, flashing lights everywhere. We have everything's beautiful theater now. But back in the day where they did not have all the extras and all the fields were actually grass, they didn't play on AstroTurf. I go back to that movie Brian sung and how it was Gale Serious. It was about him. But I think, was it Billy D. Williams that played the role of Gale Serious?
Billy D. Williams played him, and James Caan played Brian Piccolo.
Yeah, and that story, Big C, that to me means more football than who's going to be bigger, stronger, and faster. It talked about the relationships and the real-life situations that people deal with, whether it's family, faith, or fun. I love the way they told that story. Nowadays, when you see a movie, it's mostly about special effects and CGI. Do you see the difference back in that genre compared to what we see now, Big C?
Well, Charlton, you had to actually take film clip of players, you know, interactions during real game time to put the movie together. Versus, as you say now, with CG, where you get very minimal realism when you're looking at an event.
Yeah.
And so it takes people out of touch because everything is fantasy to a degree.
Yep.
And when you look at a sporting event, And, you know, everybody's sitting on the couch and they get all upset with players. How could you make such a foolish move? How could you miss that tackle?
How could you
drop that ball? How could you overthrow the receiver?
Yes.
You know, I was able to complete that pass to my son in the backyard. But, you know, you didn't have a 300-pound defensive lineman breathing down your chest while you were trying to throw the ball to your son with your wife covering him. You know?
Yes, so that's funny.
That's the thing, you know. I sit around today, Charlton, and, you know, when you get older and you've been out of the game and you're always seeing guys now that only know the game through the highlight reels.
Yeah.
You know, that they see now on Sunday. They don't know about players who played 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and even 40 years ago, Charlton.
Yeah.
They have no clue to what those players like Gale Sears and Brian Piccolo went through during their playing days.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the modern fans, Charlton, are at a loss because they don't appreciate the game. They're more concerned about the bet that they have. Maybe it's an office pool or something at the casino, you know. But they don't really appreciate the game, what athletes have to go through. They have all these fantasy leagues now, Charlton.
Yes.
And I always thought it was just a fantasy to play.
Yeah.
You know, I was living my fantasy. But now these guys are sitting up in their garage or in their basement, drafting players and trading players.
Yeah.
And so they don't really appreciate the game of football. It's about betting in whatever way that they can.
You know, that's something you brought up that story. When I first was introduced to football, I want to say I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I'll never forget waking up on that Christmas morning, and I had a football uniform, myself and my brothers, and we would play in the backyard, and I remember it be cold. So in Christmas, obviously, it's a little cold outside. People have the fireplace going, but when we got those uniforms on, we went outside, and we couldn't wait to get them dirty. Most people, when you get a present, you don't want to get it dirty. We went outside and found as much mud and dirt that we could find and ran around, and it looked like we were playing down there at the Coliseum in Los Angeles. But just that little thing of being able to form relationships, even going back to when I was a little child, of all the things that I've ever received as a gift, I remember being about 6 years old, maybe 8 years old, and I had the football uniforms, and that's something that relates to me. So even now, when I walk into a grocery store and I see on the shelves those football magazines, whether it's Sporting News or College Football Today or whatever they have regionalized, out here you see a lot of Pac-12 schools and Mountain West schools. Big C, it pulls back those memories from decades when I was first introduced into the game. What did the game do for you, and what can it do for other people? I know we talk about CTE, we talk about how to keep people safe, and that's good. But it made me feel happy. That was my point of celebration, football season, because it made me think back when I was a little boy, Big C. What's it done for you in your life?
Well, Charlton, just being introduced to the game and learning about the game and the players. You read, magazines like Street and Smith.
Yeah.
Even Sports Illustrated. Playboy had an All-American issue.
Yeah.
I don't know what the pictures look like in that.
You watched that for football? You bought Playboy for the football picture?
Well, no, I heard about it.
Okay.
Like I said, I don't know what the team looked like.
You and Johnny Carson,
I never got a chance to see the photographs. Okay.
I understand.
Everyone learned about football. They had an All-American show that used to come on. Bob Hope,
yeah. Bob Hope.
The great entertainer, used to host an All-American show every year.
Yeah.
And he always had some comedic skit about the players that came in, which was great and great insight. Charlton, I remember back years ago when they had an All-Star game. The Super Bowl champion, Charlton, would play the All-Americans. It was All-Americans versus the Super Bowl champion. The last one was played in Soldier Field.
Yes.
Pittsburgh Steelers played the Super Bowl champs.
Yeah.
And played against All-Americans. They eliminated that game, Charlton, because they said it kept players out of camp for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because they were practicing for this game. But, when you look at the way that football has evolved, the print media has always been there, Charlton.
Yep.
The electronic media makes everything readily available. But what you're doing is having somebody tell you what you should sit back and learn. It's like being a player.
Yes.
You have a coach talking to you about plays and diagrams. They always put them up on the board.
Yep.
But one of the things they still give players, Charlton, when they go to training camp, this thing called a playbook.
Yeah.
And you have to study it. You have to read it.
Yeah.
You just can't take for granted that what you get in a meeting all the time is all that you need to understand and learn.
Yes.
So they impress on you to read because they have this thing called the Turk that comes around early in the morning.
Yep.
And he might say something like, "Coach want to see you. Bring your playbook."
Yeah.
And you know, you get that knot in your stomach. I don't know if anybody's ever been scared.
Yep.
But let me tell you what that feels like.
Yeah.
That feels like you've been speeding down a hill in a car, okay?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you see the blue lights of a police car coming.
Yep.
And you know you've done something wrong, but he passes you up. But up until that point, you're the most nervous person on the street.
You never tried to hide.
That's how you feel when they say when the Turks say the coach want to see you.
You never tried to hide, and you under that sheet, you take a lot of pillows and you stuff them under your sheet so they could think you're there. So even if they tried to find you, they couldn't find you. Did that ever work for anybody, Big C?
they don't, Charlton. And you know the ironic part about it is that they wait till you're on your way to breakfast.
Yeah.
They let you go have breakfast in training camp. They honestly do.
Yeah.
So they want you to at least get that last. What they do for Jesus? That
Last supper.
Before they make you a sacrificial lamb.
Are you trying to say Jesus?
They let you go in there and the Turk is eyeballing you. I mean, he's looking at you like you a 9 walking by in a bikini.
Yeah.
You know, that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
So you go in there and you make sure you eat everything because you know you're not going to have to run it off in practice.
Are you trying to say that?
And, you know, when you come out of breakfast, you say, so-and-so, Coach want to see you.
Coach want to see you. I think they
Can
do
you
that.
bring your playbook, please?
Can you bring your playbook?
That's the importance of reading the playbook. At least you know what you're giving back to the coach.
Now, Big C, are you saying that Jesus Christ played football before the Last Supper too? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, you never know. They say he walks on water, so I imagine he probably ran on some grass.
I bet Nick Saban, his great-great-great-great-great-granddaddy was back there trying to recruit Jesus Christ when he heard they had a player from Africa that walked on water. Big C, I can imagine. I think football to me is, I can tell you, it's one of the first times that I learned to get along with people of different skin color. I grew up right at the end of Jim Crow. So oftentimes, people didn't socialize the way they do now. If you went to a restaurant, it was usually the black side of town and the white side of town. Nowadays, it might still be that way down south for a lot of people, Big C, or even in a lot of major cities, neighborhoods are still segregated. But when you go to the sports bars or the restaurants, there are no more colored-only signs and white drinking fountains, colored drinking fountains. What a horrible way that this country lived in the land of the free and the home of the brave. But one thing I'll never forget, when I started playing football, they had this thing called Pop Warner football here in California. That was one of the first times in my life outside of the classroom where, let's say, blacks and whites would get together and act like brothers. I'll never forget the coaching back in the day. They would say, we're all one color, the color of this uniform. Because coaches knew the social things that were going on. This is right past the 60s and the civil rights movements. But it was during those times that football had me become friends with people that I probably never would have become friends with. Do you think that still goes on in today's time, like the Brian Sung with Gail series and the Brian Piccolo story? Big C, your thoughts?
It did, Carlton, and it does. You know, the thing about football has always been known as a brotherhood.
Yes.
You know, as a family unit. I wasn't as fortunate as you know, when I first started playing the game, Dalton, because it was segregated.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you're on the field, you not only had to compete against the opponent, you had to compete against the epithets.
Yeah.
And the officials doing the same thing to you.
Yeah.
And, you couldn't retaliate because you'd get a flag on you.
Yeah.
And you didn't want to cost your team by someone attacking you verbally, Charlton. So, it really forced us to be stronger mentally
Yes.
than our opponents because what we had to go through. And many people of my age will understand that who played football in the 60s.
Yes.
To understand growing up and you're going into a town, Charlton, and you may not have a minority player on the opposing team.
Yeah.
And so they had grown up with a racial bias, Charlton. And so you would hear things on the field, and some of these officials had never officiated against a minority player.
Yeah.
So when you think about what you had to go through perseverance-wise, but it made you stronger as a person. It made you more determined as a player to dominate your opponent physically.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that it helped us with more than anything else because of all of what we had to fight to get through.
Yes.
To establish equality, Charlton, to show that we were equal, if not better, than the people who were opposing us.
Yeah.
Just give us a chance to play. And I remember as a freshman in high school when I showed up, and I was on the JV team. And, there was a kid who was a sophomore, and the other players that were sophomores also said, no, this is his position.
Yeah.
Because you're just a freshman. You can't play. Plus, I was minority. I was the only minority lineman on the team, Charles.
Wow.
And so here it is. I said, okay, if it's his position, then I'll play across from him. He's playing defense, playing nose guard. I'll go play center.
Yeah.
Just to go against him, to see how good he is. I'd never played center in my life.
Yeah.
But I made it a point, Charlton, every day at practice to beat this kid like he stole something.
Yeah.
I wanted to make him uncomfortable every day in that position that was supposed to be his.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, he would have to play center when I would go over and play that position. And all I thought about, I didn't even think about making a tackle. I just thought about beating him up. That's all I thought about, dominating him. When the season started, Charlton,
yeah,
he played the first quarter.
Yeah.
He started the game, and I was frustrated. But he never started another game after that, and he never played after that. I played every series after that first quarter, Charlton, in my first game in high school.
I want to ask you that thinking that I think there's a couple of movies. Denzel Washington was a coach in a movie down south, and he had that same type of story where the whole town was anti him. I think it's something about the Titans. And
remember the Titans. Coach Herman Boone, which is based off of a true story in Virginia. He was the first coach to coach an integrated team in the state of Virginia, Charlton.
Yes.
And won the state title.
Yeah.
Went undefeated against great teams, Charlton, and all of the adversity that he had to fight through, him and his minority players, Charlton, on that team.
Wow. I tell you what, I think that's part of why so many African Americans, just hearing that story you told, oftentimes being the only person of color on a football team, and then having, every Division I program now, even Division II, they have predominantly African American players, at least for the dominant teams. And I know that wasn't always the case. It was the great Paul Bear Bryant. It wasn't even him that integrated football in the South. I think that started at Kentucky, but I know
Kentucky started that in 1964. They had 4 minority players, Charlton, join the University of Kentucky team.
Yes, and that was not as well known as what Paul Bear Bryant did because he was a winner down in Alabama. There was also something, I think, in '69 at Wyoming. They did a story on that not too long ago, how there's that push, and I want to just touch on that because I think when we realize for at least all society, this affects mainstream white kids too. That might be the only time that many white Americans can really come brothers in a sense with men of color, African Americans, Hispanics, and those are the primarily groups that play football. But for mainstream society to see when they really first come in contact with people of color, it's not in their neighborhoods when they go home to live. Most people choose to be segregated in their neighborhoods. They will, redlining exists. We know what that means. You can't get a loan if you're not white in certain neighborhoods. That still goes on, even though people don't talk about it. It's still on some books, even in Seattle, Washington. Now, for Caucasian people, white men that have interacted with black men have become really good friends, like in the Brian Piccolo story with Billy D. Williams. I think that story can be more told in how doing things together through sports has united our country more than churches. Churches are, for the most part, segregated. Most people say they love Jesus, but I've known many of my white friends that would not go to a black church. They would talk about Christianity, they would talk about egalitarianism, but they don't drag their family to a black church. They would look for a white pastor, someone that looked like them, even though according to Scripture, Revelations, and Daniel, Jesus Christ was a man of color, dark skin the color of burned brass, polished brass, hair like lamb's wool. So what is white Americans in your maybe it's a hard question to answer, but what have white Americans learned by playing sports with athletes that they could also learn in the workforce? Bixie, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I think one of the things, as much as it's integrated, it's also created a fear. And that fear was when integration started, Charlton, is that many white athletes knew that they were not as good as these minority athletes who were joining all these teams. And so they used the same story, just like in the movie that you talked about with Denzel Washington, Remember the Titans?
The Titans, yeah.
That was the same type of scenario that I had in high school, is that, well, these are our positions.
Yeah.
They belong to us. This is our team. It wasn't initially saying that we were teammates.
Right.
You were almost like an intruder into their country club, Charlton, because never before had they had to deal with these types of things.
Yeah.
And so it was an uncomfortable scenario where, they really had to, walk lightly on the things that they said. They couldn't always be as open as they had before, even though it went on.
Yeah.
They were trying to be careful about it. And so when you think about society in the workforce, in the education system, Jonathan, the same thing was felt, is that all of a sudden, it's like what our administration says now against minorities. These people are taking our jobs.
Right.
This belongs to us. That's how it was looked at, Charlton, in athletics, and it's still looked at like that in society. Affirmative action, Charlton, allowed for so many minorities to have an opportunity.
Yeah.
This is one of the laws they're talking about abolishing now, is affirmative action.
Yep.
Once they get a new Supreme Court justice. And so what people need to understand is just not people of color when it comes to affirmative action.
Women.
A lot of white women will be hurt by that also if they abolish affirmative action.
Yep.
When you talk about equal pay in the workplace,
Yep.
that no longer has to be looked at. So when you're part of the president's base and you think all these things that he's trying to accomplish will benefit everybody, no, it won't. When you look at a middle class white female, Charlton,
Yeah.
she will be hurt with the abolishment of affirmative action just like minorities will.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I remember back in college having those conversations about affirmative action with some of my white college teammates or classmates, and that whole story from my white brethren's point of view, almost 9 out of 10 times I heard some lame story about one person did not get a job because they had to give it to a black person, okay? And they thought that was unfair. And I would just automatically turn that around and say, how did we get to the point that we even needed affirmative action in the first place? Why did we have to have the law step in and make it illegal to discriminate? And it goes back to the Emancipation Proclamation that Frederick Douglass helped Abraham Lincoln craft the Emancipation Proclamation. So when slaves were freed, every African American was supposed to get 40 acres of the mule. Lincoln was assassinated, and Jackson vetoed the bill and gave all that land back to white landowners. Now, when you talk to someone in the 1980s about affirmative action, you got to trace it all the way back to the Emancipation Proclamation. We were supposed to have the same opportunities that white Americans had to amass land, real estate, business, property, and it was taken away. That was white affirmative actions. And people don't see that until you educate them. That's why it's so important. You're not stupid, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, and that's what they want to get rid of now with abolishing affirmative action. When we look at the advancement of all cultures in America, Charlton, that's what a melting pot is, Charlton. When you look at sports, and you talk about it frequently, everybody want to cheer for you when that number's on your back.
Sure do.
Got that jersey on.
Yeah.
Regardless of the sports. You know, look at how they treated LeBron James when he left Cleveland once again.
Yeah.
Last week.
Yeah.
Took his picture off the wall.
Immediately.
People burning jerseys once again.
Immediately,
You think about it, how can there be so much outrage against someone who's done so much for you, regardless of color? How can there be so much outrage against one person who has done so much for your community, for your state,
Yes.
even for the United States, Charlton?
Yeah.
But you're so selfish, just like you say in the Emancipation Proclamation, you think he belongs to you,
Yeah.
that he's your property,
Yeah.
that he does not have the freedom to move around like any corporate head in America. And he's a corporate head. He
Yeah.
runs his own corporation.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so he has the freedom to move,
yeah.
to take his business where he feels that it would benefit the most.
Well, that,
And when you have people saying he shouldn't have that freedom
yes.
because he's just a minority,
Yeah.
I have never seen that type of action towards a white athlete, Charlton.
No.
It has never occurred. When Pete Rose left the Reds, that didn't happen, Charlton.
No.
You know, and any other great athletes, when Roger Clemens, you know, when he went to the Yankees, when he went from the Red Sox,
Yes.
you didn't have people in Boston burning his jersey,
No, they didn't.
and he was one of the greatest fine ballers of all time.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't have that with Nolan Ryan from Texas to Houston, you know, between those two cities. You didn't get that. They didn't treat white athletes like that, Charlton.
So that's,
But
yeah.
it's amazing how you ostracize a black athlete for exercising his right to move and earn a better living.
I love when we have, I mean, you could tie athletics into everything. And for people that say that sports and politics don't mix, that's because they're ignorant. No sports team exists without some politician voting to have a stadium built. I do want to say that sports is a billion-dollar industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation to this billion-dollar industry. And for every athletic and sporting event, you need athletic and event insurance. We work with Ben and Mark. They've been around half a century. They work with Big C Sports, whether you're a pro team, a collegiate team, a high school team, or you're a mom and pop soccer leagues. When you reach out to them, let them know Big C sent you. And the thing that I love about what sports has done, I'll never forget, there was a time where I played with some guys who considered themselves Aryan Nation, part of the Aryan Nation, like Donald Trump's base. They feel comfortable. I'm not saying all of his base, but I'm saying if you're part of the Aryan Nation, you feel comfortable with Trump. We saw what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, and the David Duke and Steve Bannon, all them good old boys. But I'll never forget this, because I was expecting not to like this guy, because we didn't see the world the same. But as I got to know him about a week later, he changed his attitude, because he had a fear, he had enmity towards black Americans. He grew up, his parents taught him that. You know, he didn't come out of the womb being a bigot, Big C. His parents and his grandparents taught him bigotry the same way you train those dogs to hunt and keep people away from those moonshine barrels, Big C. They got to train. They don't come out of the womb knowing that. They got to train them. But would you believe this guy, Caucasian guy, ended up being one of my better friends? It took about a good 2 or 3 months. We had to work through some issues, but not just me. It was an experiment where people got together, you break bread, you play together, you lift weights, you're running double days, and you realize we're all the same. It's just we have different skin melanin, because I've never been an ignorant person. I mean, I was at the time, and sometimes I still am. But I will apply to all of my Aryan Nation friends, the ones that became friends of mine through sports, not because we went to church together. Sure didn't do that. But I was taught a long time ago that all life came from the African continent. And it's irrefutable. So even the dumbest person in the world can Google Dr. Leakey and Gregor Mendel. They opine that all life came from the African continent. There's only one race of humans, the human race. But the dark gene is the dominant gene that can reproduce every hue of color on the planet. They call it black. The recessive gene is white. It can only reproduce itself. It cannot reproduce the dominant gene. That's Mendel. So when people are educated to that, they drop their racism. But if you're just another ignorant person and you don't point people to that truth, then they'll continue perpetuating the garbage their parents and grandparents taught them. Big C, does that make any sense?
Well, Charlton, life is about education. You're going to be sculptured whatever way that you live in society.
Yes.
You know, it's just like anybody can speak any language if you're born into it or and it's taught to you.
Yeah.
Regardless of the race that you are. You're going to speak based on the region of the world that you're from. Your thoughts are going to be based on the region of the world or the region of the country that you're from.
That's true.
And when you speak about these kids back in those days, Charlton, this is what they grew up in. That was the household that they grew up in.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't see a black family on television. And so for the first time when they saw a black, it was when they went to school.
Yeah.
They never saw it on television. And some of these kids, Charlton, never saw one before they got to high school.
No.
So it was like being in a foreign country to a degree.
And it didn't help. Wallace doing his thing down in the South and the church bombings and the trying to integrate schools and how, I mean, it's a painful thing when you say it was our country. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I got to bring this point up before I forget it. Because you're in the South. So when people talk about these concentration camps that are going on now, detaining children with the Trump administration, well, they're Mexicans or they're illegals, they have to demonize it to make it easier to do it. But for every person of color, and mainstream too, would you believe they did the same thing to black Americans trying to integrate schools, Big C?
Well, they dehumanized black Americans, Charlton. They weren't called people. They were called everything but people. You know, and you know, we have it going on in the White House right now where you have the president attacking Congresswoman Maxine Waters.
Yeah.
Saying that she's an ignorant person. She's not very intelligent. Yet her IQ is higher than his. You know?
Yep.
So that lets you know what he thinks about intelligence.
Yeah.
But that's how you satisfy your base, by going out attacking minorities all the time. Every time you turn around, he never called John McCain ignorant for not voting with him. He's never called Susan Collins ignorant for not voting with him.
Yeah.
So he's attacking the minorities to fuel his base.
Yeah.
Thinking that that's what satisfies them, because that's what they are. They have that racial indifference themselves, Chuck.
Did you see?
And so if he does this for them, then he can take America back to where it used to be, which is what he wants.
Yeah. He also made fun of the Me Too movement. That's for Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Kellyanne Conway and all of the people that have daughters. And, I mean, you do what you want to do with your daughters. But if you're going to take the chance to sit back and watch people have enmity toward women, then you condone it. You tacitly consent to it when it happens to people that you love. And that's why we'll always mention that part on our show. So, but I didn't mean to cut you off, Bixie, but just at talking to you, things come in my mind, and I wanted to get that point out there. Go right ahead, sir.
Well, you know, here is a gentleman, Charlton, who has over a dozen lawsuits from women for sexual misconduct. Not only that, he hired Bill Sells, the former CEO of Fox News. Okay?
Yeah.
Sells was the individual who kept Roger Ailes employed and Bill O'Reilly employed.
Sure did.
This is a guy who oversaw a couple $100 million in payments in sexual harassment and misconduct lawsuits while he was the CEO of Fox News.
Yeah.
Now, Trump has brought him into the White House to be director of communications.
Wow.
So Fox has always been an advocate. So you're hiring a guy who was fired for sexual misconduct.
Yeah.
Bring him into the White House, and we know of all the sexual misconduct he's been out alleged of, Charlton.
Yeah.
So what is he saying to the women that work in the White House now? Is that I'm bringing in a sexual predator other than myself to be in control here.
And I tell you what.
This is what, when he attacked the Me Too movement.
Yes.
He told all the women in America that have been sexually assaulted, sexually mistreated, that you don't matter. This is what he told them
And their
last night in North Dakota, wherever he was.
Yeah.
He told them that they didn't matter. And you got to look at his base to say that here it is, he's telling you, part of you, that you don't matter. And everybody's saying, well, Stormy Daniels, this porn star that he allegedly had an affair with, that she was in it for the money. Well, he paid her $130,000 for 4 minutes.
Yep.
So what was he in it for?
I tell you what, I just don't want women to put their guards down. I've known a lot of women who are athletes too, you know, and a lot of women, when they play sports, and
well, Charles, to cut you off,
yeah,
when you say women that are athletes,
yeah,
you know what he said last night?
What's that?
That those Olympians that were in that lawsuit with Larry Nassar, those young female gymnasts at Michigan State that went through all that atrocity of the sexual improprieties of the Michigan State medical staff and Larry Nassar and the Olympic staff, that they didn't matter.
Wow.
Those teenage girls, the president said last night, they did not matter.
And for
that's what he said. You think about that to all the dads out there. When the president attacked the Me Too movement, he told all the little girls that were in gymnastics that were misappropriated by Larry Nassar, that were assaulted by him and his friends, that they did not matter. This is a guy that you voted for, because I know some of you voted for him.
Yeah.
Because he won Michigan.
Yep.
But he told you that your children did not matter last night.
And I just want everyone to know that through all of the good and bad about everything in our country, the only way you make things better is you talk about it. Nobody's perfect, but I just want to make sure that we protect young women, because you shouldn't have to be afraid. I just think about this too. When I sometimes seen women going out jogging in California, a lot of people jog and work out, and you think about it. I've never been afraid for my safety when I'm out running. I'm just, whether it's morning time or nighttime, never had a fear. But in talking to some women, that's their biggest fear, that something may happen to them. And I know that as a country, we talk about sports and how to keep people safe and all, but if men can spread that whistle, that dog whistle, that this is not tolerated, just like lynching's not tolerated anymore. People say, well, you can't change things, people are people. No, there was a time, my great-grandfather was almost lynched. I heard that story. I don't worry about someone trying to put a noose around my neck when I'm out. I know there's some major cities that have crime for whatever reason, but that's something we don't have to worry about because it's against the law. And we have to find a way to make sexual assault not just through words, but against the law, because no one would condone it happening to someone they love. Big C, I do want to just touch on one thing. I know that we hear about athletes signing multi-million-dollar contracts. Some talk that maybe in the NBA, Durant will sign like $230 million. I think the Mega Millions, $283 million, won by Charlton and Big C's board. I kind of feel like Durant. I'm kind of antsy, Big C. I bought those winning numbers like Durant. You know, if he can get $230 million just for scoring 28 points a game, I feel like I can buy 28 tickets and have the same kind of feelings, Big C. Your thoughts, $283 million?
Well, you know, it's going to be a mega night for somebody, Charlton.
We'll take it.
You know, and a mega rest of their life.
Yes.
You will be in Major League and NBA status.
They can afford a ticket.
When you think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, even after paying the taxes on that money, Charlton, it will set some family up for a long, long time. We won't just say the rest of their life, but for a long, long time, that the heirs of that, you know, that family should be pretty well off. But, you know, it's a great opportunity for people when, you know, that type of money's on the table. You know, the major thing, though, is bet responsibly.
Yes.
Don't just go out and take your paycheck when you know you got mortgages due and lay it all out. You know, if you're going to do it, only one ticket is going to win, Charlton.
Yeah.
One set of numbers.
Yep.
So, you know, remember that when you go out there and say, give me 100 of them. You know, only one's going to win. Pick the right numbers.
Wasn't there a movie with Ice Cube? There was this bad dude in the neighborhood. You know, everybody has one of those guys. He just wants to beat people up. He doesn't go to school. All he does is he causes trouble. And you keep thinking you can change him, but he's thinking he can change you. So he stays in trouble. Ice Cube was in this movie. I think it was called Lotto Ticket. This guy had bought the lotto ticket, and this
Little Bow Wow was in there. Ice Cube was in there. He was this old guy in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and I'll never forget that some guy had some. I finally realized watching that movie there were two things that a vice grip was good for at Big C. One was for using it on tools, and the other for using it on jewels when the good old boy wanted to show up and take his money, but he used the vice grips on him. So everyone be responsible and safe. But the talk of some of the NBA players, Big C, is I know Carmelo Anthony's out there. There's talks about him. People may or may not want him. Obviously, his production is not going to be what it was back in the day, but he still has something. I just don't know what that something is when I watch how he was almost as consistent in almost every game, Big C. Your thoughts on who can he go to and why, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you know, he has to look at a diminished role if he's to move to another team.
Yeah, not a starter.
You know, this is what happens as players get older. And I don't care what the sport is, you just recognize that your body's not doing what your mind is.
Yeah.
You're seeing the basket. You're seeing your defender in front of you. But every time you make a move, he's still in front of you. You don't have the ability to accelerate and move around it any longer, Charlton.
Yep.
But your mind is saying, well, 10 years ago, I had that.
Yep.
It would have to be the perfect storm for him to go to.
Yeah.
And there's two teams that he may fit with. One would be the Lakers. One would be the Miami Heat.
Yeah.
But he would have to take a diminished role, and he would have to be that spot-up shooter. And a guy who was only going to get 15, 20 minutes a game, Charlton, he no longer has the star power. We saw that in OKC last year when he was surrounded by much better younger players in George and Westbrook.
Yeah.
And so all his life, Charlton, he's been the star on the team, whether he was at Syracuse, whether he was at Denver, whether he was in the New York Knicks.
Yep.
Now, Charlton, looking for his fourth NBA team, he's going to have to take a lot lesser role.
When you think about players like Carmelo, and he can still add something. Vince Carter up in Sacramento, chiseled veteran, still looks great, can still play the game, but he's going to get you about 7 points a night. He's not going to come out and average 25 points for you, but he does have a mentorship quality about him that helps the young players mature, Big C. Tony Parker, he signs a 2-year deal with the Charlotte Hornets. Does that mean that Lonzo Ball might be in some trade talks to San Antonio? Because they want Kawhi. In fact, Kawhi at least is determined somehow to end up in the land of vibranium playing for the Lakers. Would that just your thoughts on those movements, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Tony Parker spent 17 years in San Antonio, Charlton. The third most field goals in franchise history. Came over as a 19-year-old from France.
Yes.
Won 4 NBA titles, Charlton, with that organization. Moving on to Charlotte, which opens the door for a new point guard, Charlton, in San Antonio.
Yeah.
They still have some key components with that team. Now, if you're looking to move Kawhi Leonard, and I would, because in a year I have nothing for him.
Exactly.
Why not get some assets? Tell the Lakers, because you need a point guard. We'll take Ball. Under Popovich, he would probably flourish, Charlton, because his daddy's not going to move to San Antonio. Okay?
Maybe.
so he'll have a coach to listen to and not his dad.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how his dad can undermine Popovich like he's done Luke Walton.
Yeah, different character men.
San Antonio would just ban him from the arena. But you also got to look at sending another player, either Kyle Kuzma or Brandon Ingram. If the Lakers are in the mood, we must win now, then you can't worry about building up young players for the future. You got to make this move within the next 2 to 3 seasons if you plan on winning a championship.
Yeah.
LeBron James has a 4-year contract. So you need players that can produce in the next couple years, Charlton, not develop.
Yeah, I agree.
And you need to get rid of 2 of those young players that were in the starting lineup last year, and starting with Ball and, It's either Kuzma or Ingram. After that, you have to make a choice as an organization. I would send Ingram. Kuzma's much cheaper, allows you a lot more salary cap flexibility.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then get Kawhi. Send him a draft pick also, Johnson. So do the 3-for-1. You have a proven all-star. You have proven nothing with those young players, okay?
Yeah.
You have a proven all-star. 2-time Defensive Player of the Year against guys who can't get out of the nightclub. I'm getting rid of the guys from the nightclub and taking Kawhi Leonard.
Well, let me ask you. I mean, everybody has a nightclub. Everyone has a nice spot. I remember back in the day watching the movie Malcolm X, directed by the great Spike Lee, featuring Denzel Washington as Malcolm X. There was a brother by the name of Lindo. His name was Red in the movie, and Malcolm was trying to beat him up some numbers. And they told him that he's going to get you. He does everything in his mind. But they had their night joints, the juke joints. They had all of that. Why does L.A. get maybe a bad rap when people say, "Oh, the nightlife is too much"? It's no different than New York or Philadelphia or Miami. You can party all throughout the night, but if you're responsible, and that's part of the organization keeping the reins on these guys. Do you think nightlife is a distraction in Los Angeles more so than any other major city, Big C?
Yes, it is, Charlton, because it's the city of stars and lights. Even more so than what New York is. New York is just a mecca.
Yeah.
And you can disappear. But, of the places of interest in Los Angeles, everybody who is somebody goes to those places, Charlton.
Yeah.
Whether you're in the entertainment industry, whether you're in the sports industry, there's places that you gravitate to. When you see shots on television,
yeah,
video, they're generally out of Los Angeles, Charlton, not some other place, because everybody wants to be around somebody.
Yeah.
And so you can get absorbed into that. And, so many young players in big cities, and not just Los Angeles, but in big cities, period,
yeah,
have lost their careers early on because they can't make that separation between enjoyment and pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they just group it all together.
Yeah.
But when cities are too big for players, and players now, Charlton, are just too young. I've never been an advocate of the young player coming right out. I know in college football, it has to be 3 years removed from your high school class.
Yes.
I think the NBA needs to make it at least 2 years removed from your high school class. Not this one and done, Charlton.
Yeah.
The game has gotten so watered down in the NBA as we look at it today.
Yep.
We look at the East, Charlton. We can't name really 5 superstars in the East. They're going to have an Eastern All-Star.
Yeah.
But if you look, they mainly come from 3 teams, Charlton. When you look at it. But, when you get out of the top 7 teams, Charlton, in the East or the West.
Yeah.
Does anybody know who the players are unless you're in that town?
Good point.
That's what happened.
Yeah, it does happen. So we know we're going to keep an eye on that. Big city, small city. I know a lot of guys got money, get on airplanes. They can be anywhere they want to be in a couple of hours. I want to say, "Oh, Canada." We talk a lot about sports. I really miss singing "Oh, Canada," Big C, but we want to pay homage to the CFL, Canadian Football League. In the Eastern Conference, Hamilton is atop of the pack at 2-1, followed by Montreal at 1-2, Ottawa 1-1, and Toronto 0-2. In the West, Big C, in the CFL, we have Calgary. The Stampeders are 3-0. Edmonton's 2-1. Warren Moon's old stomping grounds. BC, the British Columbia Lions, 1-1. Saskatchewan 1-2, and Winnipeg 1-2. Tonight's game, Ottawa is at Montreal at 7:30 p.m. kickoff. Big C, your thoughts on why Canadian football's lasted over 100 years? I wonder if they have the same talk on player safety that we hear all the time in the United States of America. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I think football has gone universal as far as player safety talk, Charlton. And you talk about Montreal. Pat Shermer, former head coach of the Green Bay Packers, is the head coach there in Montreal now, Charlton. So they've always had some type of American impact. I remember Marv Levy of the Buffalo Bills came from Montreal as a head coach. And so he led the Bills to 4 consecutive Super Bowl appearances, Charlton.
Yep.
But, when you talk about that league, I think one of the things that has helped that league out, Charlton, is that
100
they have a
years.
bigger field.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the angles are not there that we get in American football as far as being able to hit a player. And, you know, the game is much faster.
Yes.
Because they have a shorter play clock than what you have here in the U.S. And so by having a bigger field, Charlton, you're generally going to have smaller players.
Yeah.
Because they have more ground to cover. And I think that helps a lot in player safety. You know, it's like when you look at Pop Warner football, and you got that game that's played on the same size field, Charlton, that the NFL game is played on.
Yeah.
But those players can't get to those angles as fast, so you don't have as devastating a hits as you do in the NFL and in college football, Charlton.
Yeah.
So I think that's what made the Canadian game safer, is because that field is bigger and wider. And so you would compare it to our youth football, that the players just can't get to certain positions as fast and, you know, have more potential to injure someone, Charles.
Yeah, and so for some of the people that I talk to in media, and they say, man, do you think football is going to survive another, 10, 15 years with all the talk of CTE? And then whenever any player does anything wrong, people are pedantic. They make it seem like the whole league has done something wrong. But I think you touched on something. We can improve the helmets. We can improve the shoulder pads. We can improve a lot of things. But at some point in time, I think the league has to look at maybe making the field a little bit wider, even if it's just about another 7 to 10 yards wider. It's going to make it less. You're going to have a harder time with the hard compacts. And I think even the end zone, when you have more space where you can throw into the back of the end zone, it just seems to me there's a reason it's lasted for over 100 years. People, think about that when we talk about how to make the league safer. Big C, final story, something about golf. It's better when Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson are playing the game of golf. And those two, we talked about winning $280 million in tonight's Mega Millions. Them good old boys, you would think they have enough money. It's chump change for them. But their negotiations for about a $10 million winner-take-all in a head-to-head matchup with Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods. Big C, I'm all for it. We have the big three with former NBA players. NFL players really don't have another league they go to once they retire. But big threes for a lot of former NBA players. I think to have these two players, maybe they're not the best anymore, but they are the best names, and they can carry the name of golf better than anyone else can in the universe. Your thoughts, Big C?
Well, Charlton, if you put Tiger and Phil on a Sunday, winner take all, $10 million purse, which is what their negotiation's about. Now, Tiger wants each one of them to take the $10 million out of their own pocket, put it up. Just like in a poker game.
Yeah.
There it is. There's $20 million sitting there. He said that would change the dynamics of how Phil plays.
Yeah.
Because Phil would get a little tense if it was his own money.
Yeah.
Because the sponsor's money,
Yes.
Phil would play loose. But Tiger said Phil was a tightwad.
Oh, really?
Because he wouldn't put up his own money, but Tiger was willing to put up $10 million of his own.
Well, when you got $1 billion, it's a little easier.
I just think it's great in every capacity.
Yeah.
Whether it's television interest, whether it's betting interest, something, just for golf.
Yeah.
I mean, the golf world would stop to watch these two great titans play, Charlton.
I watch it.
To go out there and do 18 rounds. I think they should actually make it 19 holes.
Yeah.
Instead of 18. Let's go 19, just that one extra.
Yeah, that playoff.
Guarantee that somebody automatically won the tournament, Charlton.
Yeah.
And didn't have a chance to enter the tie.
Yep, I
So
love that.
I think that's what golf needs to lend to. Just like you have match play in poker.
Yeah.
Let's do some match play in golf, where we go out, take the people that golfers want to see,
Yes.
that the fans want to see. Because we can have tournament after tournament, Charlton,
Yep.
one every week or every other week.
Yeah.
No one cares. I watched the last tournament, Charlton.
21 under?
21 under.
Yeah.
The final hole, Charlton, there was nobody around the cup other than the people sitting in the gallery.
Yeah.
Because it was anticlimactic.
Yes.
Tiger was already in. People over there taking selfies with Tiger.
Yeah.
While the winner of the tournament's still out on the course.
Yeah.
It looked like Tiger had won, Charlton. Golf had won because Tiger was competitive.
Yep.
But the tournament winner, Charlton, an afterthought.
Yeah. I know it's important that we have to find a way to keep the game relevant. And the one thing I hate when athletes retire, people say how great it was when they played, how great it was when we had Ali, how great it was when Barry Bonds was at the plate, how great it was when Arthur Ashe was at the tennis court, or you had all the different great sports athletes, and people say, oh, I remember how great it was back then. Well, we still have the great guys now. Brazil today advances to the first semifinals in the World Cup since 1986. A lot of good things happening all over the sports universe. We want to wish everyone a very happy weekend. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Bundini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man. He would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, tonight is the final night of the Special Olympics up in Seattle, and I want to give kudos to all those tremendous athletes who competed up there and all those who medaled and did not medal, Charlton.
Yes.
Just to compete was a special time in life for all of these great people and their families that participated in this event. This is something that should never go unnoticed. The will and the desire of the human body, Charlton, regardless of what condition it is, is always striving to achieve.
That is always well said. We wish all of the athletes nothing but the best all over the universe. Every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide. Follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever any excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage all on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.